Hello, fellow viewers. If you like what you hear,
give us your ears on Spotify. See you there.
This brings me to how non-representational art and abstract modern art are associated with social revolution. Hitler hated modernism. He, along with other fascist leaders and followers, called this degenerate art, of which also included art by Jewish artists, abstract or not.
That's fucking bullshit. Fuck you.
It's such bullshit. I remember when I was first learning about abstract art and how much I hated it because I had my traditionalist views of art back in the day.
Oh, yeah.
So when I learned that Hitler was like, I hate that, I was just like, do I really want to align with a crazy man?
Do I want to be on the same level as Hitler? I don't think so.
Do I want to be a fascist? Special exhibits were made for these with the sole intention of eliciting negative reactions. Captions written on the walls accompanied the poorly hung artwork, insulting the artist and the art. Ironically, the Degenerate Art exhibition in Munich attracted more eyes than the quote-unquote respected Great German Art Exhibition, which held more of the traditional works. Yeah, some attended to genuinely hate on the work, but many attended in fear of not being able to see this art ever again. Their fears soon became a reality, unfortunately, as much of that art was destroyed. So sad to hear when art is destroyed. It's like, how could you destroy such
it's heartbreaking,
beautiful things? It's so sad. Thankfully, the impact of this degenerate art, as they called it, reached international crowds. Of course, the fact that the Nazi regime hated it helped with its popularity in self-proclaimed democratic nations. At this point, one could assume that abstraction and its sub-movements, such as abstract expressionism, Dichtil, and Cubism, are revolutionary in nature due to their rejection of traditional visual art norms during that time. The art piece I wanted to share with you all today is Pablo Picasso's Guernica. This 1937 Cubist oil painting of 3.49 times 7.77 meters depicts the tragic bombing of Spanish town Guernica. This bombing was inflicted by Italian and German warplanes on April 26, 1937, the same year this painting was made. This piece has an interesting history, given that it almost wasn't created at all. Picasso was commissioned by the Spanish Republic to create a piece of artwork to be displayed at the 1937 Paris International Exposition. He accepted this commission and was originally going to make something without conveying a strong political statement despite the Republic's request. Typical artist.
I don't want to put a stance on anything. I want to make sure that my avenues are open so that I can get all the commissions.
Yes, which is smart, but also it's interesting that he took that route because usually devout leftists such as him will jump to the opportunity to make a political statement in their art.
Right.
So
maybe after the bombing he was like, okay, now I'm super left. Now I get
dude, and that is exactly what happened. At first he was going to compose a scene of a painter in his studio facing a naked model lying on the sofa. After the attack, he shifted gears and created what is now known as one of his most famous anti-war works. Mirroring the emotions many were feeling after this devastating moment, Picasso uses a monochrome palette of grays and blacks in his abstract depiction of the carnage. The primary figures that can be seen at close examination are the wounded, visibly distressed horse, a bull, screaming women, and flames. Truly a gruesome sight to accurately represent a gruesome moment in Spanish history. And I didn't write this in the script, but I do want to say that this bombing was especially devastating because it was a city square. So while the war was happening, the town was full of women and children that were just, doing their daily shopping. Imagine you're at the store and all of a sudden it's just everything is destroyed around you and even you are probably dead. That's so scary. That's just terrifying.
It is. It's horrible. And God, I remember when I first saw this piece and knowing the concept behind it and its conception and like why he did it, you just can't look away from the carnage and like and I feel like that's probably how when something is super tragic and horrible, you can't really look away, and this piece is no different than that. Like it's so heart-wrenching, the emotion that you feel from how chaotic he composes the layout. It's intense.
Yeah. And even though it is an abstract piece, like I feel like it accurately depicts what happened that day.
It's really raw. The style really lends itself to the emotion and the feeling of what it might have felt like during that moment. And it's choppy. It's choppy, like how the buildings and the memories probably felt like as it was happening.
The fact that this isn't like a realism piece and like everything isn't painted like perfectly, it's all just like a conceptual and cerebral.
It leaves you speechless.
Yeah, it puts emphasis on the feeling of that exact moment rather than how that would have looked. And then, you know, realism tends to romanticize what reality looks like. Interesting question. I thought about this. I was kind of drunk when I wrote this question, but I was like, a lot of people know that Hitler was an artist before he became the infamous figure that he is now. Do you think Hitler would have had more luck as a non-representational artist rather than a mediocre realism artist? Because I'd venture to say that by today's standards, his old paintings aren't even that bad. His art reads more impressionist than anything, honestly. But I think if he would have tapped into that, you know, non-representational art and just tried to do that instead, like maybe he would have had some luck with that. Who knows?
I love the way that you phrase it as a mediocre realism artist, because they really are. There's nothing to write home about his watercolor paintings of landscape. And that's the thing. That's why angry soapbox. This is why I think landscape and like realist paintings are just on a different level of enjoyment for me now, because it's like you can go to a museum and you can look at all these old paintings in museums, but the ones that are really interesting are the ones that provoke thoughts that you've never thought before.
Right.
So I think he would have done better as a non-representational artist. And I kind of wonder what his art would have looked like, because he had really radical ideas. And I wonder what that would have looked like if he hadn't been so hateful of the Jews and the what was it? The
degenerates.
Degenerate art. Like, fuck you, man.
Yes, honestly. Like, who are you to say?
Jeez Louise. Okay. Oh, I love that question.
Yes. And the reason, like, I only say that it's mediocre because in realism, it has, like, an emphasis on replicating perspective and as perfect as possible, you know? Mm-hmm. And, like, looking at his works and his landscapes, it's like, okay, the perspective is kind of strange, and some things don't, like, some of the objects don't look like they exist in the space that he puts them in. So
the chiaroscuro is way off.
It's super lacking, but I can totally see them as being impressionists, because it looks that way to me, because there's no, like, intense rendering. It's just like, even though honestly his building renderings were pretty good by today's standards. So, like, I think if someone his age were trying to apply to an art school now with what he had back then, he would probably get in.
He would probably get in, honestly.
Yeah.
Not until, like, the top school, though, because they need more than just landscapes. He would be versatile, but he would get into a school. A school, not prestige, you know, institutions. No rizzed. It's no rizzed, but
yeah,
he would make it. I've seen worse. Thank you for listening again. Please follow us on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and whatever else we throw at you at Beyond Iconic Podcast. Hashtag BipDoodles.
We post regular podcast updates and fun illustrations and even pictures sometimes of sneak peeks of our next episode. So if you want to see that and have some community interaction with us, please follow us. Do it now.